This is the Psychology to Live By podcast, where we discover how to live life a little better.
Something that I find really enjoyable and rewarding about ambient music is that it's not trying to tell you how to feel. I think it's providing you a platform and a space to perhaps allow yourself to feel what you're feeling.
That was the voice of TJ Dumpster from Six Missing. He's an ambient artist, award-winning sound designer, mixer and composer based in Austin, Texas. This was an insightful and inspiring conversation in which we discussed music, creativity and mental health. Themes in the conversation included how music really helped TJ overcome his addictions, anxiety and depression. How creating ambient music provides a platform for listeners to feel their emotions and to practice a form of mindfulness. The double-edged nature of social media, which can both connect people and make them feel more alone. The therapeutic value of sharing experiences. How quitting alcohol, exercising and changing his eating habits really significantly improved his well-being. And finally, the importance of gratitude in dealing with anxiety and negativity. I took a lot from this conversation and I hope you do as well. Well, hello there, and it's Dr. Chris Stevens here, and as you can see, I am with Six Missing, which of course is TJ Dumpster. And I'm really happy to be here with you, TJ. How are you in Austin, Texas?
Hello, Dr. Chris. I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, obviously, we had a little chat earlier just to set up and so on. So we roughly mapped out at least the broad outlines of what we might want to talk about. And it's quite extensive. So we'll do our best to contain it to about 50 minutes if we can.
Yep. I've got my pajamas over here. We're going to do a sleepover. We'll have a nice 4-hour fireside chat.
Unfortunately, I'd love to do that, but I have commitments after you. But
understandable.
The broad outline of it is this is a podcast series on the relationships between music, mental health, well-being, and probably also the nature of the music industry, and so it's quite broad. And I know in our pre-discussion, you talked a little bit about your own experience of anxiety and depression, and substance abuse, and so no doubt we'll talk about that at some time. But I'm really intrigued by the relationships between those experiences, how you've learned to manage all of that, and how that relates to your creativity. And I'll try not to lead the witness, which is one of my great failings, because I'm impatient. But so we might start with just tell us about your music. My sense of it, it's a beautifully, almost more meditative, ambient soundscapes, in listening to it. But can you, just for people who may not be familiar with your work, what are you doing in your music? What do you think is how would you characterize it? What are you trying to achieve?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, actually. For me, I leave a lot of the interpretation up to the listener. I think that something that I find really enjoyable and rewarding about ambient music is that it's not trying to tell you how to feel. I think it's providing you a platform and a space to perhaps allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. I think that there are so many things, so many distractions, so much happening in our lives, and seemingly things become faster and faster and more occupied, that we don't, as people, take time to really even kind of register how we're feeling. Um, we have so many of these things coming at us that are aiming to separate us from us and to, come in, I guess, with big advertising. But with ambient music, specifically mine, what I like to try to do is just give the listener a place to exist, just be, just come into presence almost in a very meditative, mindful approach, and just feel what they're feeling. And even if that means that the music is there to tune something out, such as a commute, train, traffic, hopefully you're not listening while you're driving, but if you're in the care of somebody else driving, or you're flying, traveling, anything, just, writing, journaling, drinking coffee, doing dishes, going for a walk, running, quite literally anything. I think the music can be there to help just bring your focus inward. And that's really where my music comes from for me is it's almost self-medicative in that way, if that's a word.
Yeah.
But it helps me feel better making it. And that's why I love sharing it, is in hopes that other people will be able to experience the benefits of what I feel while creating it.
Yeah. This is not surprisingly, it's been a common theme in talking to musicians, even though obviously a huge range of styles and types of music. But it is about sharing experience, trying to convey an experience. And, as my good friend Terry McBride said, music is all about communicating emotion.
Yeah.
And and I would think it's everyone that I have spoken to, which is about 9 people so far in this series. They've talked about it as a therapeutic process for themselves.
Yeah.
And as hopefully a therapeutic process for others. Now, I should be careful there in saying therapeutic, because I don't want to over psychologize things. So I don't mean it in the in the clinical sense, of, but just in a sense of it nurtures my well-being and hopefully it nurtures someone else, or it allows me to explore certain emotions and feelings and thoughts and share that with others.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback on saying that really does resonate with me. And I think it's almost the same feeling that maybe, a chef would feel kind of looking out and seeing people enjoy their food. Like you're in service to the people in that way and you want to share your gift with them. I mean, as long as I can remember, this is all I really love doing. This is the one thing that I never tire of. It's the one thing that just, even in my worst of moods or my best of moods, kind of just is always there for me. So to keep it for just myself would feel, I don't know, like I was selling it short maybe a little bit.
Yeah. And of course, we're deeply social creatures.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like it doesn't make sense to talk about creating art and no one partaking in it. And obviously with music, the history of music, especially the prehistoric nature of music would have been always very communal, very tribal, day-to-day sharing. So I think and there is no culture that hasn't developed music, and babies are born attuned to musicality and prosody in speech. So it's obviously a very important evolutionary component of our makeup, right? Which is amazing if you think about it, because we tend to think of music as this sort of special artsy thing, but I think it's quite foundational in many ways. Like every culture in the world mothers sing, often without words, in the same ways, across cultures. It's quite extraordinary, to their children. So I think this is a very important part of it is the sharing. And
Yeah.
and I can imagine it's a huge thrill when people love your work.
That's of course a great benefit, but it is, just with what you were saying about, music being so ingrained in us as human beings, like it doesn't actually make sense, but it is this intangible thing that we all encounter and appreciate and experience on such a deep subconscious level.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, like that's as serious as I take it as a producer, as a songwriter, as a crafter of these sonic worlds. Is it feels that serious to me. It isn't just something that I'm just doing and throwing out there and
Mm.
hoping to cash a paycheck. Like I think um, I would be doing it and have done it for quite a long time without making a single dime off of it. So it it's not about the money. It is so much about the connection and hoping. I I've received messages from people um, who have experienced the music and have allowed the music into really intimate moments of their life, really, um, have had family members pass and they are
Mm.
there with them and they have been in the hospital for treatments for a long time and there's a lot of waiting around. And so I had received this one message from a woman who was telling me that there's not much to do when you're in a hospital. And so they listened to a lot of ambient music and a lot of that was mine. And she told me that now that her husband is no longer with her, when she hears the music, it reminds her of him. And I'm getting choked up talking about it. But
Mm.
I feel so undeserving of that intimacy in somebody's
Yeah.
life. But when you receive a message like that, it gives you that fuel, that like passion to continue going because it's helping somebody. And I
Yeah.
guess, I mean, you're in a similar field. You enjoy helping human beings as well. So
Yeah.
I would imagine we share a lot of the same foundations there. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, for me, that's like, oh my gosh, it's the thing that just continues to push me to just keep making it.
Yeah. And you read my mind, of course, in that I was mapping it onto my experience. So thank you for that. And is there, because, in our pre-discussion, you mentioned that you've had your struggles with anxiety and depression and
Mm.
substances. Um, the What we were just talking about, that sort of profound sense of connection and the sense of contribution, the humbling sense of, you know, has that been important for you in your own, navigating your own mental health and becoming more, better, I suppose, happier, healthier?
Yeah, that's kind of the tricky thing about anxiety, isn't it? I get um, a lot of social anxiety.
Huh.
And I think that I don't always had it. I mean, to my earliest memories of
Yeah.
going and doing things as a child, more than just being, quote, oh, a little anxious about something. I mean, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah, I understand.
physically a lot. And I think that's why I gravitated towards alcohol specifically in my later teens and early 20s and
Yeah.
everything, because it soothed a lot of that um, anxiety. There was a lot of self medication happening there, which allowed me to more freely, what I thought was more freely communicate and connect with people.
Yeah.
Obviously, for me, it wasn't so successful in that way. But um, now that I'm 11 years sober and I no longer play out in bands and go and do the shows and things, and I'm a solo act that largely exists within a studio by myself, the feeling of isolation is ever present, and the feelings of anxiety I fight against to push past my kind of comfort boundaries to get out and connect and be with human beings. But creating music and pushing it out into the world has ticked a little bit of that box
Mm.
for me, because I'm able to connect with people um, through the music in that way. And I guess that is the double-edgedness of social media, because we had spoke about in our
Yeah.
pre-conversation about how I find it to be very double-edged, is that you can connect with people from all over the world, even for us right now. We're on different sides of the globe, but it does also come with the negatives as well, of, you know, making people feel more alone, um, reinforcing that feeling, I guess. So I guess that's a long way around saying, yes, I think that the music does help in that it forces me to connect in that way, and that does always make me feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? Because there's some, I wouldn't say necessarily there's paradoxes there, but you sound like a person who's more introverted than extroverted,
Mm.
and then on top of that, there's some social anxiety, but there is this need to connect to humans, and I mean, it's a mistake. I'm a pretty, oddly enough, I'm a pretty profound introvert, and
Hmm.
and it doesn't mean I don't like people. It just means I like them as one at a time generally,
Right.
or maybe two.
Hmm.
And I don't know if there's research on this, but my observation has been that introverts tend to have fewer but deeper friendships.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, definitely would agree with you on that.
yeah. So it's not like the introversion part is antisocial. It's just it's a different wiring, and you're born like that. A lot of these
Hmm.
things are genetically programmed into our personality, but it's interesting how you've navigated that, and it makes perfect sense that alcohol promises to be a magic cure, and it's a disinhibitor, it's a social disinhibitor. It
Yeah.
takes the edge off anxiety immediately, but of course it doesn't deal with the underlying issues, right? Um,
Right.
Now, the type of music that the beautiful, ambient music that you create, you mentioned earlier, you used the phrase meditative.
Hmm.
Just curious, and reading some of the language that in your profile at Network Music and elsewhere, that did a bit of due diligence on you. Um, uh, it is the language of meditation. You're talking about impermanence and transience and mindfulness and so on. So, have you had?
Yeah.
Is that something that you've explored?
Yes, quite a bit.
Yeah.
Meditation, um, came into my life around the same time as I started finding sobriety. I think that
Yeah.
it it had to, in a certain way. I don't know that I realized that it had to, but now looking back at it, 11 years later, it had to come in at that moment, because I needed something like that. And I think a lot of the programs that exist for addicts and alcoholics, the languaging didn't connect with me, because
Mm.
it spoke a lot about higher powers and things that just aren't in
Mm.
my makeup. So I think finding mindfulness, finding meditation as a practice was something that I could really latch on to. And I found just it to be profoundly world shifting. It became this thing that started as me just using, the iPhone apps that are out there,
Mm.
and finding myself, catching myself being on a train in New York, because I'm from New York, and commuting into the city, and just watching my breath and realizing that I could do that any point in time. You don't have to be closed eyes, meditating, sitting down, practicing. You could turn anything in life into a practice, a meditation practice. And through the process of doing that, of slowing down, of being more observant, being more aware, becoming present, I think the music that I was creating up until that point was more of uh, just a shell that I kind of shed for the time being, and my music naturally started to get more spacious. There was more room within it for thought or for no thought.
Mm.
It just became more of this soft cloud-like place um, for me to even just create within. So mindfulness really informed so much of all of that. And then, like anything, I started digging deeper into it, and I began practicing in sensory deprivation tanks, and
Oh
was doing
yes.
doing flotation
Yeah.
therapy. I'm
Just
sure
for
you're familiar.
just for the listeners, we probably should explain what that is, because it's basically it's like a very large bath that's enclosed, and
Yeah.
it's dark, and
Mhm.
you're in a high saline solution, so there's a sense of weightlessness, and there's a deprivation of light and sound.
Yeah.
You can take it from there.
No, that was exactly it. It's spot on. The water is heated to the temperature of your body, so you're really just removing as much of the input to your brain as possible. So yeah, no
Yes.
stimuli really. And through that, I've had really powerful experiences that bordered on psychedelic, and really just
Yeah.
connection in a way to something, you know, um, much larger than me, much larger than any of us, in an intangible, indescribable thing. And kind of ever since touching that, grasping that a little bit, um, I've just kind of like tried to make music that is more or less a soundtrack to some of that type of those
Yeah.
themes, those ways of becoming mindful. Um,
Right
and
now, I've been restraining myself mightily because I'm very interested in all of what you've been saying, and so
yeah,
let's get excavate a little bit. Um,
sure, no
so
restraint needed. Let's dive
no,
in.
no, no, no. So again, for the listener, maybe a few clarifications to like, we're using words like mindfulness, and
Hmm.
this could have all kinds of meanings for people, or meditation. And I think some clarification here would be really helpful, because mindfulness is not about shutting off all thoughts, and sitting necessarily in a sort of nirvana-like state of complete peace, and occasionally you can have those experiences, but by and large it's not like that. It's like sitting on a train in New York, and there's a lot happening, but it's more one's relationship to what's happening
Yes.
starts to transform. And
Hmm.
the Buddhist term for this is equanimity, which is a radical posture of presence and acceptance. So it's not pulling it in, not pushing it away, and that which mirrors your description of your music earlier. You're
Mm.
creating a space for people where they can cultivate that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And so I think this is really very interesting, because there's more than one way to skin a cat. Like you can sit cross-legged,
Hmm.
doing breath-centered vipassana meditation. I reckon some of the most mindful people I've met a fisherman, stand at the ocean for 3 hours with hardly moving,
Hmm.
lost in the presence to sensations on their index finger.
Hmm.
And so but the one thing, however one goes about it, it
Hmm.
the the experience that has these similarities. That suddenly there's an okayness to everyday experience, whereas prior everyday experience was conceived of and experienced as problematic. Um,
Hmm.
you know, I wouldn't say I don't think I've ever had an anxiety disorder, but I'm
Hmm.
certainly down the anxious end of the spectrum, and I'm quite often visited by a feeling of something's wrong.
Mm. Oh, I like that.
And
Visited by. That's quite. I'm quite jealous of that. I sometimes have someone, a tenant, taking up rent
you're
inside.
inhabited
Yeah.
by,
Hmm.
but and my ever suffering wife, you know, I, she's used to me obviously, and I say to Mary, everything's all right, isn't it? Now
Mm.
I know everything's all right, and so this is another way of mindfulness and she'll roll her eyes, of course, and say, yeah, everything's fine, and on except on the rare occasion she says, no, I think you're really worried about this and you should do something about it.
Mm.
But most of the time, our worries and anxieties, our sufferings, have more to do with our thinking than the world.
Right.
Now, as I said, there's many pathways to that. And listening to your music during the week, I know exactly what you're talking about. I had it
Mm.
playing while I was working, but occasionally I'd just step back, let it wash over me. And it
Mm.
reminded me very much of my own meditative experience. It's like, oh, I can take a break from the mind dictating everything, and I can just watch the contents of mind, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really just wonderful, and I'm sure people listening are going to resonate with that. So anyway, so you were a drinker, and then you decided to go down the path, maybe 12 steps or something like that, and it wasn't quite the way for you. Um, Meditation spoke more directly to you. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Meditation, exercise was a big one.
Uh huh.
I just felt like
Yeah.
when the drinking stopped, it became this. Um, Well, being an addict, I think you're kind of always an addict. So I'm addicted to other things in other ways now. They just so happen to benefit me, maybe from a health perspective.
Healthy addictions. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. I'm a workaholic. I am very obsessed about being productive, and I yes. So the addiction has jumped in those years to another lane, but getting healthier started triggered a series of events of me kind of taking care of myself overall, which
Yeah.
then lifted a fog from my brain, which allowed me to start kind of identifying these areas of my life that needed to be looked at and addressed and fixed up a little bit as well. And yeah, it just had this really kind of this domino effect. And that
Mm.
while that was all happening, the music was more or less cataloging the process. So, way back to my earliest stuff, I was going through kind of a paradigm shift. I was losing a lot of my world that I had come to know. I lost a
Mm.
lot of friendships, I lost a lot of
Mm.
um, old habits. So, the music was a little edgier and had a little bit more of a intensity to it. And then as time went on and I found kind of more of what my voice was, the music softened out and the edges were rolled off a little bit. And then with this last record that came out, it's called Gentle Breath, that came out on Network. This was a period of time where the pandemic had happened My wife and I had moved from New York to Austin, a city that we knew nobody in, 3 weeks before the pandemic happened. And
Wow.
we were thrust into isolation on top of kind of moving already. And so there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of loneliness, a lot of depression that came about during that time. And the record more or less journalistically captured my experience of it. So it
Yeah.
started off very tense and anxious, and through a lot of sleepless nights and anxiety attacks and real panic attacks. And also having to start another new project, the worry that comes along with that. Will
Mm.
I be creative again? Am I out of gas? Am I out of juice? That type of thing loomed in front of me. And so the project itself kind of was the antidote to it. And in
Yeah.
creating it, I ended up kind of breaking through a lot of that and realizing that, yeah, like you just said, everything's okay, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
this is all right. You know, we can take our time with this. We can also be um, honest enough to share this side of me as a musician that is a little, um, you know, more intimate, I guess.
Yeah, and
With
it's
my
kind of interesting. A lot of aesthetic creativity, because there's all types of creativity. But if we're talking about music, it's often the sharing of the darker side of one's experience, right? And
mm,
the interesting thing about that is it's not necessarily there can be great beauty in it. There may not be
right,
great beauty in the actual experience. Like it can be pretty horrendous.
yeah,
But there's something about sharing the depth of one's experience that is inherently beautiful, and it helps when other people map their experience onto it. They don't feel alone. There's something curative
yeah,
in like, oh, he feels like
hmm
that too.
yeah.
And
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 we,
he,
oh, I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, you go.
I was just going to say, well, this is more or less what we were chatting about in our pre-conversation too, is
Yeah,
like why I feel like it's so important to use a platform like the social media that I have to discuss this stuff, because all too often social media becomes such a highlight reel of positivity and
yeah,
accolades and success
yeah. It's
that
all
people
curated, perfection, airbrushed. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I think that people often forget that there is, well, first of all, a lot of hard work that goes into projects in general, whether it's building a home, making a picture, learning a new language, cooking,
yeah.
writing, making music, studying to a PhD, a doctorate. Like there's a lot of time and effort that goes into these things. And I think that that's something I get concerned about for people that are so invested in social media, is they think, hey, if I try this new thing and it doesn't land right away, I'm a failure and I need to give up and try something else. And that's just not the case.
Yeah, it probably already exists. I don't know. I mean, there should be a subgenre in social media called fuck ups. Like
Mm,
where people just share
yeah.
just all the million ways things go wrong. Rather
Uh-huh.
rather than the one. Because I think that's endearing. It's like again, and it's a relief to people, especially if they
Hmm.
know that you're quite good at what you do, but you still stuff up. You know.
Right.
So I think that kind of common humanity is the curative thing, that
Yeah.
and somehow or other just sharing it. It's a bit like my game. Honestly, in the therapeutic relationship, I hardly do anything.
Mm.
I just try to listen with empathy. And I mean, occasionally I might say something useful, but the lion's share of the work's done by the other person.
Mm.
But it's the witnessing in a certain way and the sharing of an experience that is curative in itself. There's
Yeah.
hardly ever that there was very often people's circumstances in their life can't be changed. So
Mhm.
what has to change is their relationship to those circumstances. You know,
Yes. And again, that I think is powerful. A powerful tool is mindfulness in that way.
yeah,
Is yeah,
yeah,
you had mentioned it before, but you're totally right. It isn't the ceasing of thought. It's just breaking the identification that you have with those thoughts. Those thoughts aren't you. They are just thoughts that will continually go forever and ever through your mind, and you need to
yeah,
just kind of observe it, like you said, the fisherman from the shoreline, and just
yeah.
let it go. You don't have to corral it.
Yeah, at the risk of being a little bit nerdy, with respect to
Please.
meditation, it's a shift from identifying with the contents of consciousness to identifying more with the consciousness itself, the sort of one as awareness. And
Yeah.
and I know you've had some fairly profound experiences, and the gist of these experiences is this. Sitting back as the awareness itself, and boundaries of self and the world start to dissolve, right? So there's that sense of being a part of something that's greater, that transcends us, but also includes
Mhm.
us, right? And I think music is a perfect medium to give people that experience. When people are at a concert, they're in a group setting. There can be a very oceanic sense of awe that people
Yeah.
get. Where paradoxically, they're amongst all these people, but they're not alone. They merge with the group and with the performer. So I think there's a lot of these parallels here. But I just wanted to, just on that, come back, maybe a slightly different tack here,
Sure.
because you talked about, I think earlier in your musical journey, you were doing more shows and things like that.
Hmm.
And you didn't say it, but I just wanted to check something with you.
Sure.
It seemed like to me that the psychosocial factors of that. Now, what I mean by that is you're on the road, you might be up late at night. There's drugs and alcohol. There's
Hmm.
all the tensions of sexuality, and there's concerns about money,
Hmm.
and success and failure. Just a million of these very challenging factors. What I was going to check with you is, I got the sense that you were saying that was very related to your addictions, and particularly alcohol and drugs, that really need, and clearly, obviously, going to be related to your anxiety and depression. So what I'm checking is, though, was it a conscious move to move away from that to get yourself back together again, mentally and psychologically, that you actually felt this was destructive for you?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think a lot of things were happening all at the same time. I think that
Yeah.
as I gave up the alcohol, I was also getting older, and I was feeling less inclined to want to live the life of, going from
Yeah.
show to show to show to bar to bar to bar.
How
And
old
I
were you
needed,
then?
well, so I mean, I started playing music when I was 13, 12, 13.
Oh gosh.
Um, so I've been, you know, playing shows to some extent for a large part of my life. Um, and I guess when 19 came around, I went to a college that was really focused and quick. So I was in and out in 12 months, and I was in the workforce as like a 20-year-old.
Mm.
Um, and so a lot of my colleagues were people who were 30, 40, who had been in the industry, and that's just what they did. So not so much to say that I tried to fit in. It was just easier to fit in with groups like that if you were partaking in a lot of the stuff.
Mm.
So I guess a lot of the addiction and kind of identifying that and letting go of the alcohol paired with wanting something a little bit more under my control in my life, which
Yeah,
is the opposite of kind of touring and road and playing
yeah,
shows and all of
yeah,
that. Yeah, kind of went hand in hand. The funny thing is just you're right. I am more of an introverted person, though I've been a quote performer forever. And so it's a funny field to be in
yeah.
as somebody that has anxiety, social anxiety, addiction, and introversion. That I really do feel lit up and fulfilled when I'm performing and I'm in front of people or
Well,
sharing. And
I have a bit of a theory about this. I don't know whether
please,
it's supported by anything empirical, but I'm sure I read somewhere a long time ago, and that more actors than not are introverts, for example,
mm,
and yeah, a big portion of my career, actually, the middle portion, sort of got taken up in the sort of speaking circuit, So I was traveling places like New York and
hmm
talking to large crowds, and it's completely contrary to my nature. Like the perfect weekend for me is I say to my wife, "Is anything on this weekend?" And she says no, and I go, that's the perfect
hmm
weekend. But the theory is that there is still a part of us that needs to be able to explore other identities,
mm,
and to like you're acting in a way when you're performing, but it gives you a chance to expand who you are, which in effect is what happens when we socialize, because we are changed by the people that we socialize with.
hmm
This so-called self is a very fluid phenomenon. It's an
yeah,
ongoing dynamic construction. And
yeah,
so I think for introverts, we often miss that expanding of who we are and that sense of connection. And this is oddly enough, a safe way to do it,
hmm
right?
hmm
Because it's a bit impersonal,
yeah, right.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I cut across you there, but yeah, so there was this move towards more control over the variables, but also getting older, right?
Right.
And in talking to the other, musicians, others have had to deal with that. They decided, yes, they love the performing and they want to continue it. So they've
Mm,
had to make all kinds of adjustments. And you mentioned exercise as one that was important to you, and that certainly has come up. Laying off the alcohol has certainly come up.
mhm.
But just the general resilience-based stuff, like sleep hygiene,
Yeah.
get eating more healthy food, uh, and these things are super important because the causal arrow towards our is not always like if you take cognitive behavioral therapy, right? It's got an implicit theory that our emotions are caused by our thoughts, right? And many of them are. There's no doubt about that. But the causal arrow can go in other ways. If you're feeling shit, like physically shit, like you've had terrible sleep, you're getting over a hangover. It's There's a thing called state-dependent cognition. In other words, the way you're going to think is determined by how you're actually feeling. And
Mm,
conversely, if you wake up and you've had a wonderful sleep, I don't know, you've had great sex the night before, and,
mhm.
and you wake up next to your beloved, and the sun is shining, and it's spring, and the birds are singing. Your mind is going to search for ideas that are congruent with how you're feeling,
Mm,
and that's one of the problems with states of anxiety is that the mind will then search for reasons that you feel shit, and it will find them
mhm.
because the psyche likes to be congruent with how we're feeling. Does
Mhm.
that make sense? So by
Yeah.
changing the way that you're feeling, the disciplines that you've undertaken, it I'm leading now. I am leading the witness, and so forgive me. But
No.
one would expect that then the nature of the music is going to change to mirror the inner change of the psyche. I'll shut up
Yeah.
now and let you riff off that.
No, no, not at all. I think that I'm loving all of this, and you're so right, because my experience is supporting everything that you're saying, as well as, when I first quit drinking and I started waking up not feeling like shit. I kind of didn't realize how much like shit I was feeling until I wasn't. And I think similarly, when I started changing my eating habits, and I gave up certain things. I gave up gluten and I gave up dairy. I
Yeah,
didn't realize how kind of ill and tired I was feeling all the time until I wasn't feeling that way. And so I
yeah,
feel like there are all of these things, the drinking, the eating, the exercise or lack of exercise, the poor sleep or the shallow sleep, that we move in throughout the world without the intention and without the presence and just plain awareness of how we're actually kind of feeling. And I think that that was really kind of my main thought through our whole conversation, is just how important it is, or was for me, to start becoming aware of those things that I was feeling, like
yeah,
taking enough time to just become aware, like, am I actually breathing in deeply? Like, is the breath getting to my stomach, or am I shallow breathing? I don't have to change how I'm doing it, but just how is it? Like, even just the simplest thing of, where is my breath in my body right now? Am I clenched? Should I relax my shoulders? Like,
yeah.
all these little ways that we kind of move so quickly through our day and our life, of just not even checking in with ourselves. So I
Yeah,
think,
I can't remember who told me this, but it might have been. I might have heard it on Sam Harris on the. He's got a wonderful app called
mhm,
Waking Up, and
yeah, sure.
he talked one day. I don't know what the context was, but he was talking one day about people walking around like they're a clenched fist.
Ah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
And of course you don't know you're walking around like you're
No.
girding your loins all day long, as it were. Like you,
Hmm.
and then suddenly, if there's a realization, actually, I don't need to hold myself so tight.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I was holding myself tight. Oh, it's a lot easier to just actually relax.
Yeah.
Um,
One of
now,
the things
yeah,
with
you
the
go, and I'll try to remember
flotation,
what's in my mind. But you go.
I was just going to very quickly say, is like, one of the things about flotation therapy that is such a trip in the beginning, when you're starting it, is the feeling of, you're like, I've actually relaxed my body, and then you realize, oh no, I'm still holding on to this tension. And when you release on a very deep level, you realize how much we
Yeah,
as humans are, just like you said, girding our loins just by existing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so that was just my one thought. I'm sorry, please continue.
No, no, no. It's really great. Look, just using that analogy of the float tank and the immersion. If we go
Mhm.
back to your music, um, it occurs to me that your music's like a float tank for people, right?
Ah, I appreciate that analogy quite a bit. Yeah, I I I hope so. I do hope so. I think there's enough in there to kind of have the ear find certain things to hold on to, but it can change every time you listen to it. And I think that's really just based on whatever mental state you're in when you're sitting with it.
But yeah, and I think that's right.
Mm.
Might be more to it though, in that in immersing in your music is going to shift their state. In the way I was talking about before.
Mm.
And then in shifting their state, it's going to change their mind. Will then their thoughts will become congruent with it, with this more relaxed state,
Mhm.
right? So there's a kind of you're not dictating the content of their mind, but you're dictating the flavor of it, if I can put it that way.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
That it's going to be, if it's a piece about the softness of the breath, or if it's a piece about transience or openness, then those moods can then they're going to determine the kinds of thinking that people will have that will be relevant in the context of their consciousness and their life and their history and so on. But still, it's the flavour of it that's important. It's a bit like when people do gratefulness practices, right?
Sure.
It changes people's moods. They haven't changed anything in their life, but they're just attending to stuff that's more useful, that's more helpful.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. We talked about, like, oh, you mean I can just relax? Like right now everything's okay. Because the other thing about anxiety in the modern world, especially we talked about social media briefly, is yes, there's all the curated stuff about how perfect everything is, but actually the bigger driver of that, the algorithms and that is outrage and negativity, right?
Right. Yeah.
They're the really successful ones. And I think we live in a time where people's attention is being deliberately channeled to the negative, to everything that's wrong, why you can't relax, why basically how fucked everything is. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that the things like climate change, that they need our attention, but not at the expense of the fact that how lucky we are, like you say, look at us now, like, I'm in, Australia, you're in Texas, we're having this wonderful conversation. Like, what a gift.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's 3 clicks above what I think really what you and I should even both be grateful for when we wake up in the morning is that our eyes opened this morning. Like we're up and we're alive. And like that is, when things start to get a little big for me, I think what I like to think about a lot is, that there's a video and a clip of Carl Sagan talking about just how insignificant we are. And it makes me feel, it always makes me feel so much better, as silly as that sounds, to hear that I don't matter. And I don't, our planet doesn't even matter. We don't matter in that way. We are such a small piece within this large fabric and quilt that is all of the universe complete. And that always just makes me feel a lot better, because this little problem that I have because my software won't open today, or, oh, this email made me upset, or damn, I saw this person achieve this thing and I wish I could do that. Like, it just puts all of that into perspective for me. And I look, some of the stuff that is, so negative about social media, but the kind of the influx of all of the horribleness of the world it does make me feel very fortunate to be in a position where, wow, I have this way of expressing myself and I can share it with people. That just bare minimum is like, I'm good,
Yeah, it's one of the great paradoxes or ironies or whatever it is of existence, that when you realize, just how impermanent you are and how insignificant, somehow or other it takes the pressure off. It's like, oh, okay. So it's then about enjoying what we have no right to have, as it almost, it's just like a miracle that we actually exist.
Yep.
And consciousness itself is an extraordinary thing that no one is even close to understanding. So once we get that sense of gratefulness, then I don't think it makes us passive or inactive in the world. In fact, if anything, it can take away a lot of our fears. That we actually may be more effective in dealing with things that need to be dealt with, but not getting too carried away with ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
Which is the essence. Now, speaking of getting carried away with ourselves, I don't know whether you've noticed, but about 50 minutes or more have passed since we started our conversation. We've got to end it somewhere, and there's probably not going to be
fair enough.
there's not going to be any good place to do that. Except I would like to say that I'm sure our listeners are going to really resonate to this conversation. I'm certainly grateful to you for your music, firstly, but also just for, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I felt it's been very stimulating, and I think it will help people generally, but also other musicians, may not have thought about what they're doing with the clarity that you have, and will help them actually validate their process, right? Anyway, that's by way of thinking. Thank you so much again, and who knows? We may well speak again. I'm thinking about what to do as a sort of follow-up. I haven't quite formulated that yet, but if you'd be open to that, I'd certainly be open to talking with you.
Oh,
again.
very much so. And the feeling is so entirely mutual. Thank you so much for hosting me and having me here. This is such a lovely conversation. I always enjoy getting to speak about kind of existence and consciousness and all of this from someone that has spent a lot of time thinking about these things. So thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, Dr. Chris.
That's fantastic. All right then, take care. And in this podcast, you've been listening to a beautifully atmospheric piece of music by Six Missing, which is simply entitled Rest. You've been listening to the Psychology to Live By podcast. If you'd like to know more, go to my website at drchris.life, and please share the podcast with people you like so they can like it too.